To order. Welcome, everyone. We have quite a list of folks to hear from today, so we'll get started with the Board of Tax and Land Appeals, please. Welcome. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
And don't forget the microphone.
Getting in here.
It can be.
Yes, I learned when we went to the house. I forgot to turn it on. Good afternoon, Senator Innes and the honorable senators. My name is Michelle LeBrun. I'm the chair of the Board of Tax and Land Appeals. With me is Ann Stelmack. She's our board clerk, and actually we have another board member with us today. She's sitting right behind us. That's Teresa Walker. We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to provide an overview of the Board of Tax and Land Appeals for the 24-25 budget. Our funding is split 90% general fund and 10% highway fund. Our mission is to provide a fair, timely, inexpensive, and readily accessible appeals to taxpayers and property owners. And the expertise that the board has is in tax and real estate matters, which gives the public a knowledgeable and neutral body to appeal, thereby ensuring unbiased and transparent resolution to all matters appearing before us. The board's budget is a maintenance budget. We were able to live within the governor's prioritized needs, not as prioritized needs, the governor's established budget. I think we're below it actually, and also with the House. And that's about it. Okay. With that, we respectfully request that you approve the budget as it's been approved by the House. Okay. And we're willing to answer any questions that you may have.
Great. All right, thank you. Questions? Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Could you just explain to us, please, what the House change specifically was?
I think Ms. Stelmack can answer that question. It's dealing with IT.
Yes, the 19.5 represented, unfortunately, let me state that originally when we did our budget, we were not aware that we have a database license, a SQL database license, that apparently DOIT told us after our budget was submitted that it needed to be replaced, or they wouldn't be able to support it. So unfortunately, the governor even couldn't, it was too late for the governor to add it to his budget. So what had happened was DOIT went to the House and just explained the whole situation. It wasn't just our agency. I think there was a few others who used the SQL database, and then the House accepted that and added it to those agencies, and we were one of those, is my understanding. So, yeah.
Other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you.
it. That was quick.
Less than 10 minutes.
Yes, indeed. So, Deb, can we keep moving? Okay, great. Terrific.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Next up and on page 22 is the Governor's Commission on Disability, please. Good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us.
Don't forget the microphone.
Yes, thank you, sir.
If it,
So,
it's not lit. There we
oh,
go.
there you go.
Okay.
It's on. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Mr. Senate President, and members of this Honorable Finance Committee of the Senate. My name is Chuck Saya, and I am the Executive Director of the Governor's Commission on Disability. Seated to my left is Ms. Stacy Dubia, who is our Business Administrator. I did have some handouts that I delivered with the LBA, I believe. So it's a PowerPoint, which is a very exhaustive PowerPoint. I'll give a very high-level view of the PowerPoint in the interest of time. And then there is a handout which really breaks down the budget that we can look at further. So again, just by way of a very high-level backdrop, the Governor's Commission on Disability is an executive branch agency which is guided by the principles of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ADA was passed in 1990, and it abolished the discrimination based upon a disability. And what I like to refer to as the ADA truly leveled the playing field for individuals with a disability so that they could enjoy society as the rest of society, and to ensure that they have full access to the services that we're all entitled to. Just to, again, by way of a background, according to UNH, the IOD, which is the Institute on Disability, as reported in 2021, for New Hampshire, 1 in 8 individuals, 1 in 8 reports having a disability, which is about 12.7% of our population, which is consistent with the national averages. The GCD is made up of a statutory commission as appointed by the governor. Right now we have 17 commission members who represent a broad range of the cross-disability agencies, as well as consumers and family members and service providers for those with a disability. Statute also provides for ex officio non-voting members that come from Department of Labor, New Hampshire Employment Security, education with vocational rehabilitation, and services for blind and vision impaired. So again, at the GCD and the staff, because we deal with the ADA on a regular basis, the GCD is truly New Hampshire's ADA resource. And that's what we try to do, truly collaborate with state government, so because we're all on the same team, to really educate and train as it pertains to the ADA, and to assist the public within that also. When we look at the staff of the GCD, it is made up of 7 individuals, including myself. There is 1 individual who handles what we refer to as Title I employment matters, Title I under the ADA. Her position is 100% federally funded. We have an accessibility specialist that looks at the physical environment, the architectural environment, to ensure that buildings are compliant with the Code for Barrier-Free Design. And we have a research and information specialist who deals with the multitude of calls. We get about 600 calls a year as it pertains to the Americans with Disabilities Act, and our research and information specialist is handling the issues around service animals, benefits, federal fair housing for individuals that may require accommodations. The core functions of the ADA essentially are to educate and to train. Some of the programs that are operated at the GCD is New Hampshire's Able Savings Program, which is known as Stable NH. That is a program where if you are an individual with a disability, you can save money tax-free without jeopardizing needs-based benefits such as Medicaid and supplemental security income. What we have seen, and this is right across the country, prior to the establishment of these ABLE accounts across the country, an individual could only have so much money. If they went typically beyond $2,000 in cash, it could jeopardize Medicaid or SSI. So these accounts administered by the GCD and the New Hampshire State Treasurer ensure that individuals can save money. We have as I had mentioned, the Client Assistance Program, 100% federal, dealing with employment matters. Through funding by the Public Utilities Commission, we have the Telecommunications Equipment Assistance Program, and also Newsline for the blind. We have a statutory committee at the GCD known as the Architectural Barrier-Free Design Committee, which collaborates and works with other state agencies to ensure that if a state agency, HHS, DOT, DMV, is entering into a state lease, The AB committee reviews it again to ensure that there is barrier-free access. So again, that's a very high level of what we do at the GCD. For our purposes today, and I believe it begins on page, I know I've looked at it, page 22 of the budget book. So there are 3 accounting units, or I think they may refer to them as organizations, 1004, 1006, and 1007. 1004 is the accounting unit that takes in all of the general funds and some other funds from New Hampshire Department of Education. 1006 is 100% federal, and 1007 are funds from the Public Utilities Commission. In his letter to me, Chairman Gray had suggested that we should really highlight the significant budget issues that we should bring to your attention. And what we see is that when we compare what we have put together as a budget for 24 and 25, and we compare it to the actuals in FY '22, the biggest increase was in Class 10, which are the salaries for classified employees, as well as Class 60, which are the benefits. The reason being is, as with other agencies, and I assume the private sector also, we had a high vacancy, even though a small office. So again, our expenditures in Class 10 and Class 60 during FY '22, because of the vacancies, really shot the figures up when we put together the 24-25 budget. Also, embedded within the approved budget from the House, which when obviously as approved was put in the governor's budget, approved by the House, we are requesting a a part-time person at the GCD. And the way we look at this part-time person, the genesis of it, this person would handle ADA matters and serve as a resource for human resource personnel across state government. Back in 2018, Governor Sununu requested the Governor's Commission on Disability to put together a work group to examine the challenges that individuals with a disability may have when obtaining and retaining competitive integrated employment in the state of New Hampshire. We put together a work group, we came up with some recommendations, and one of the recommendations was this part-time person, which we envision will be a resource across state government. So that's it in a nutshell at a very high level, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. I know you have a busy day, so I'm more than willing to address any questions.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tell me about Newsline for the Blind.
Yes.
Tell me what you have on in terms of newspapers that they can access.
Sure.
How many people are accessing it? And I know you're funded in perpetuity because I funded in perpetuity.
Yes.
So tell me about Newsline for the Blind and the usage there.
Sure, that's a great question, Senator D'Alessandro, and obviously even before my tenure began at the GCD, I knew that you were pivotal in bringing this funding. So through the PUC, the Relay Service Trust Fund, the GCD receives $31,500 every year for that. Right now, we have as of March of 2023, we have 401 subscribers to the program. 3 newspapers in the state of New Hampshire, the Seacoast Online, the Union Leader, and the Concord Monitor are part of the Newsline for the Blind program. And it looks like, and I'm just reading off statistics, just for the month of March, it looks like it averaged about 802 calls just in March for individuals that were accessing Newsline. So essentially, if I may, for the rest of the committee, what Newsline for the Blind does, if you are an individual, for whatever reason, you cannot access the print media, you can't read the print media, you would call in as a subscriber, and you can listen to the Union Leader, the Concord Monitor, Seacoast Online, and a plethora of other subscriptions that are across the country.
Good.
So I hope that helps you, Senator.
Perfect. Usage is very important to me because we had a situation at one time where usage was down. And do we publicize Newsline for the Blind so that through the Association for the Blind so that they can know how to access it, know what's on it, and so forth? So do we get the word out that we're there and we're going to be there?
Yeah, and another great question, and you're 100% right. Newsline for the Blind is something that we have ensured when dealing with the national organization we ensure that the administrative privileges have been, so that we can now access them. On our social media, we have a consistent messaging. We message with the organizations such as Future Insight, which is the former New Hampshire Association of the Blind.
Great, great. Just one further question, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Where, where is, in your personnel, I don't see how you can add another person when you've decreased your spend from 23 by $11,000. Where is it? Where's that built in?
So and correct me if I'm wrong, Stacy, the new person, Senator, would be on class 50. So when we look at the FY '24, it says 63,141, but that accounts for one existing part-time person, which is funded by the New Hampshire Department of Education, and the other one, which would be the 31,427, would be a request for general funds for that
Okay.
person.
All right, I see that. Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. So, there's no additional questions? All righty. Then,
We're running right on schedule, ahead of time.
Council on Developmental
Thank you.
Disabilities?
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of this honorable
Okay,
committee.
thank you.
Have a nice day.
I apologize for running in and running out. I've got 3 prime bills that I'm trying to do over an election lot in the House.
Thank you.
Great day.
Page 217. Could be.
Is there executive council?
No, they're not here.
Might as well call them and see if they can come down early, and that way if the council on disabilities comes down, but I'll hand it back over to the vice chair
All
and 8
right,
feet across the street.
we'll give it a minute, see if we can get the EC here.
Get your steps in today.
I think so.
Behave. We'll give you a minute to settle in. All right. Welcome. There you go.
There we go.
Great, thank you.
I should know better.
All right. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you. My name is Megan Rose, for the record. I'm the Executive Assistant for the Office of the Executive Council. I thank you that you're running ahead, and I was a little behind. We are going over some last-minute setup things for tomorrow's council meeting. So I have provided electronically to Ms. Martone and as well as hard copies today, just a brief presentation about the Office of the Executive Council. And so I'll just kind of go through it briefly with you. So the first page is really just our office setup. It's a very small office. It's myself and the counselors, and then not even included as an actual position, but money we have funding for is a part-time position to help with office coverage. But it's paid for out of a separate class and is not technically it's not a full-time, it's a part-time position. Our council mission statement is just ensuring public access to the executive counselors and providing constituent services. And I am there to support the counselors and their responsibilities to the citizens of New Hampshire. I think the next page is probably my favorite. I put a lot of effort into kind of figuring out the details. I have been in state government for the better part of 20 years, and I served as the part-time assistant to the council in 2011, and so that was like 2 maps ago. And so I still remember that map very vividly and struggled for the next 10 years with the second one, and now we have this one. So this was a really good exercise for me in, getting familiar with this new map. And then I wanted to know, like, how big are the districts? And so I did. I went through on Google, and I looked up each and every town, and that is only landmass. That does not include any water. That's just specifically landmass. And it just shows, the comparison between districts 1 and 2 and how close they are now. So a lot of people will send emails to the counselors. They're like, if you could please pass this legislation and please do this. And so I think it's always important to explain to people, the counselors don't pass legislation and they don't create laws. Here's what they do. And it's quite significant, the amount of money that they oversee that comes through the governor's agendas at the council meeting, and then all of this funding then, being appropriated by the legislature through our budget process, as well as, being there for their constituents throughout their entire districts. They approve the notary and justice of the peace applications, all of the board confirmations. The governor nominates, the council then confirms or does not in some instances. We do public hearings, which are required by law for judicial nominees as well as public utility nominees, and then at the discretion of the counselors they do for agency heads or commissioners. And then there's GASIT, which is the 10-year highway plan, which is always rotating and always changing, and there are some hearings going on, and there will be in the next 2 years as well as we move forward to the next phase. So some of our budget highlights, we met the target that was requested by the governor's office. We're pretty consistent in that we are a small office, and we try to be very fiscally responsible about how we're utilizing our funding. This particular budget, our prioritized needs, we're asking to increase the funding for the executive council stipends. They've not been increased since fiscal year 2010, which was actually technically before me. And with the amount of traveling that they do throughout their districts, as well as their requirements to be here, and then our On the Road show, which we do from the months of July to approximately October, the money that they get in their stipend goes to cover that travel, as well as any mailings that they do, any mail that they send out. It's kind of like a blanket for costs incurred. And from what I understand, and maybe Senator D'Alessandro would know something about this. It didn't used to be that way, but Councilor Burton, I think his expenditures at the time were so voluminous that they were like, okay, we just can't with this, and this is what we're going to do for you instead. And that has been in play for, I want to say since the 70s, but maybe not, maybe the 90s. I can't remember. I did look and I can't remember what it was, but it was well before my time with the council. And then the other piece, the other two pieces for our prioritized needs is increasing funding for a part-time office assistant position to allow for office coverage. So I am technically the only position in the office besides the elected officials. We do have a part-time person. Her name is Joanne Rule. You probably know her because she used to be the full-time person, and we have been absolutely so lucky to have her because the office is very nuanced. It's just very nuanced. It's political, but you can't be political. You're a state employee, but you have to be able to come to work and leave politics aside and do the job and support the counselors no matter what their political persuasion. So Joanne obviously had done that for years, and she hired me as the part-time person. I went on to full-time work, and then when she retired, I applied for the position and was lucky to get it. She wants to actually really truly retire, and so I will be in the business of looking for someone to replace her, which I'm sure you know from other agencies. Finding people to fill positions that are part-time is incredibly challenging, especially when there's no benefits. So I'm anticipating it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. I would like to be able to try to be somewhat competitive in offering a reasonable salary for a part-time person, and part of that is it literally is office coverage. It's if I take a vacation, there'll be somebody there to answer the phones to help the counselors, someone there to help during council days, because having one person, you can make it work, but there are gaping holes that, one person can only be in so many places at one time. When we take the show on the road, it would be nice to, if we have the ability to have somebody back here at the office covering the phones and being present in the office while the other is out at the meetings. And we've been fortunate to be able to do that, but that's going to be changing. So that was one of the prioritized needs. The last being DOIT, based on their recommendations to maintain our technology as it is. They put together what they believe our prioritized needs will be, so we can continue as we have been. The next page is just explaining where the funds are, like which class goes to which funds. And then there were some questions when I was before the House about the counselor's salary, and that is, so I added this page so I could explain that it's set by RSA 94-1A. The prioritized needs breakdown is just talking about dollar amounts, which I think that's all listed in the pages that were approved by the House and the Governor. And then the summary of, which is the amounts in total at the end. And then just kind of to explain a little bit of what a year looks like towards the end, we have the 2022 calendar year recap. It talks about the public hearings that we held, the meetings, approximate contracts, confirmations, and how much money the counselors are overseeing, which again comes from the approval of the budget by the legislature. So I don't mean to rush through all of that. I think y'all are early today, so hopefully I'm not longer than anybody else, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Thank you. It's really nice to put a face to the name. So it looks to me like they're increasing their salary by like $1,000 a year.
So for their stipend, it would be an increase to their stipend, and I feel like,
1,400 maybe?
yes.
Okay.
So what it would do is, in the past, because District 1 was proportionally so much bigger than the other four districts, District 1 stipend was always a little bit more. But now that District 2 is just about the equivalent, District 1 and 2 will get a slightly larger stipend than 3, 4, and 5.
And their in-state travel reimbursement, is that also changing?
They don't get, it's all wrapped up in that one thing, so.
Oh, it is?
Yep,
the only
that's all
payment they
included,
get.
yep,
Thank you.
yes.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Great to see you.
Good to see you.
In the old days, Sue Keats used to have that job.
Yes.
That was 100 years ago. That's where we got $40 a day.
Oh,
That was our stipend. We didn't get anything else. But I noticed that the transfer to DOIT has changed. And it's heavy in the first year and heavier in the second year. What are you getting from DOIT?
So typically, what we have right now for items that we have to maintain, the counselors each have an iPad. And we have it kind of set in rotation where I have a laptop that I use for office work, and that gets upgraded. And then the next year, the part-time assistant laptop gets upgraded. And then the counselors' iPads, and then we have a printer and a copier printer. So those things are pretty much in rotation. So at about the second year, I'm thinking at that point we would be either at the multifunction printer, looking at that, or the counselors' iPads again.
Further question?
yes, of course.
Can they get the agenda on their iPads?
Yes.
Saves a lot
Yes.
of paper.
Yes, that was something that was instituted, I want to say somewhere around 2013, 2014. Counselor Van Ostering was here, and he had really pushed for that electronic piece. So Counselor Gatsis gets his electronically, Counselor Warmington for sure. Some of the counselors still get it both ways. They get it electronically and paper, but that means they have access to it through their iPad and a secure link from the Secretary of State's office.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
They're here. All right. The Council on Developmental Disabilities has arrived, so please join us up front. Good afternoon. All right.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry about the mix-up.
That's okay, no problem. We made it work.
For the record, my name is Isadora Rodriguez Legendre. I serve as the Executive Director at the New Hampshire Council on Developmental Disabilities. At the Council, we're dedicated to dignity, full rights of citizenship, equal opportunities, cultural diversity, and full participation for all New Hampshire citizens with developmental disabilities. We are a federally funded state agency, so 100% federal funds. We get just over $500,000 to use over a 2-year project period. So whenever we get our $500,000, we have 2 years to spend it, which allows us to carry forward funds in the case of continuing resolutions, government shutdowns. We can continue to operate, or, God forbid, the elimination of DD councils. So councils were created by a federal law known as the DD Act. So there's a council in every state and territory of the United States. And our primary areas of focus are advocacy, capacity building, and systems change work, and to ensure that the New Hampshire citizens with lived experience of intellectual and developmental disabilities get the supports, quality services, and their needs met in order to participate fully in their community, whether it's through employment initiatives or community-based projects that increase access. So we're very specific to developmental disabilities, which makes up at least 60% of our council membership. So people with intellectual developmental disabilities and parents and guardians of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And that really ensures that the projects we support and initiatives that we champion are led by those most impacted by disabilities. The other seats on our council are what we call agency seats, and these are agencies that are also providing supports and services to people with lived experience of developmental disabilities, including the Department of Education, Voc Rehab, the Institute on Disability. We have representatives of the Bureau of Elderly and Adult Services, the Bureau of Developmental Services, et cetera. And so together, I like to say most of what we do is collaborate and partner with other agencies because we have very limited resources. We have a very small staff. Just a few full-timers and a handful of part-timers making this work. So part of what we use our funds for is for that staff time to deliver projects and activities and support conferences and periodicals that really help increase awareness about people with disabilities, about the people who support people with disabilities in the community, and really make sure that the community is aware that they're a valued member of society and that we should be including them in everything we do. So the council develops a 5-year plan to help support the needs identified by the community. We do a lot of surveys and stuff. I included a copy of our 5-year plan. We try and make sure that our materials are very easy to read, very plain language, so that our members can also access and understand our initiatives and our priorities. We have an impact sheet that I included for you all, which talks about some of the things that we've supported over the last few years. And then as far as our budget goes, we don't have the majority of what we do is either staff putting on projects and working on activities that directly align with our 5-year plan, or providing small grants in the community. So we have a number of different small grants that we provide, including scholarships for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and family members who want to increase their advocacy, increase their leadership, and really get involved in their community. And then also community-based projects that can help increase community integration. We also have what we call demonstration activities. So every year or so, depending on what's still unmet in our 5-year plan, we will release an RFP for closer to $25,000 or $50,000 that can help really create either some sort of pilot project or some sort of activity that is still left unfinished with our 5-year plan. So we typically have a lot of funds allocated for our grants and scholarships as well. There really weren't a lot of significant changes in our budget from previous years, except that I do want to point out that because we have carry forward funds, because our grant operates on a 2-year project period, we were inaccurately capturing that in previous budgets. So it looks like our budget jumped by like $250,000. It didn't. It's just that we received further clarification from the governor's office that we should be capturing that as our carryover in addition to our anticipated federal grant. So we won't know what our federal grant is until October, till Congress votes on the budget, but we anticipate getting about the same amount of money as we did last year. So that additional $250,000 or so is from last year's grant award, which is carried forward. The only additional cost that we included in here, I believe, was from DOIT. I'm sure other agencies have talked about the IT services being higher than anticipated. But other than that, I will entertain questions if anyone has any.
Just one. It looks like there's some shift of funds from permanent employees to temporary. Could you elaborate on that just a bit?
Absolutely. So last year, we had been operating with 3 full-time staff and about 4 or 5 part-time staff, including individuals with disabilities on our team. And so last year, when a position became vacant, and because of the changes that have happened with workforce challenges during the pandemic, we thought that we would try to split that position into 2 support positions. So we took the funds allocated for the full-time position and created 2 part-time positions, which we currently have people in, which is fantastic because it was really difficult to find a full-time person that could really serve the dual need of policy and projects, which are the 2 big focuses that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate that. Others? Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.
All right. And the Treasury Department is next, please. Do we have? Yes, we do. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, State Treasurer Monica Mazzapelli. So you're getting a handout from me, so I'm just going to follow that handout. And I also, I know you all have a book to follow, so I'll probably, my handout refers to the pages on the comparison, the House to Governor comparison. So just so you know what I'm doing. So my intention today is to just highlight some of the changes that we requested during this biennium, and also a few of the changes from the governor's budget to what happened with the House. So, so I will start with page 2 and page 3. I'm just providing a very brief overview of the Treasury. I provided this to the House, so I thought to include this. So page 3, I'm just including again our mission, and then the composition of our organization. We actually have 23 positions, 5 unclassified and 18 classified. But with this budget, we actually intend to we are abolishing 1 position. So I'll elaborate more in a minute. On page 3 is the main functions of the Treasury: Treasury operations, the Office of Investment and Debt Management, our Abandoned Property Division, and what is an area that keeps growing, the College Savings Program and the scholarship programs that, in collaboration with the College Tuition Savings Plan Advisor Commission, we participate and we oversee the administration of those programs. So with this budget, so on page 4, page 4 and page 5. So I'll move to, I guess, on the budget book, the comparison, that's on page 193. So what you're going to see in this budget is for the first time we're splitting what you saw before as treasury operations. We're splitting for the first time this financial activity into, we're separating the actual treasury operations from the Office of Investment and Debt Management. So in the past, that was all combined, but the statute actually creates, RSA 6B actually creates the Office of Investment and Debt Management. So for the first time, we want to separate the financial activities so we can track those costs separately so there's more transparency. This is just housekeeping, and it doesn't really have a cost impact. Doesn't add additional costs to the state. So it's just, again, housekeeping. This was as a result of our 3-year strategic plan that we developed, and it was one of the discussions that we had. And so that's what we did in this budget. The other significant change in this budget is our request to transition our IT operations from in-house to the Department of Information Technology. Since the creation of DOIT, we've been self-supportive. We've never been part of DOIT. So what we're asking in this budget is to transfer the essential IT services to be provided by DOIT. The main reason for that is in the past, it worked well for the Treasury. We had more employees. Over the last few years, one position was eliminated years ago. We had 2 IT employees that were running the operation. We had one vacancy for like 3 years. It just became impossible to fill that position. I just can't run the Treasury with 1 employee. So it's just cybersecurity is a real thing, and we're just concerned that this will, if we continue this way, we just hurt the Treasury and the state. So Commissioner Goulet agreed to this. The governor agreed to this. So in each accounting unit, you're going to see a little bit of additional costs in order to migrate IT operations to DOIT. During the governor's budget, I guess when they were trying, even though the governor agreed to this change, when they were finalizing the numbers, some numbers didn't make it to the governor's budget, but the House agreed to put the money back. So those are the changes that you see in the class lines transferred to DOIT. You see that the House agreed to put the money back. So in essence, the House passed what we requested. So on page 5 of the handout, I'm also highlighting the Office of Investment and Debt Management. What we did is we moved debt service under that office. Is essentially an activity code in the accounting system. So now all of that lines up under that activity code. So one of the changes that you're going to see, so debt service is actually on page of your book. I'm going to probably go through the pages and change a little bit of the order. But debt service is actually on page 199 of your book, of the budget book. And I guess a significant change that you're going to see is the actual expenditures in fiscal year 22 compared to what you will probably see now in fiscal year 23 and what we're projecting for fiscal year 24 and 25. The main difference, the main reason for that change is that debt service has been decreasing over time. One of the main reasons is because we did a refunding in fiscal year 21. We actually achieved significant savings during that time when we had the opportunity to refund our bonds. And so we applied those savings to fiscal year 21 and 22. So with that refunding, the structure of our debt changed a bit. So then we did have some savings in fiscal year 22. Fiscal year 23, what you're seeing in the adjusted authorized is what we initially budgeted. So, but then again, our trend is our debt services declining. So for debt service of fiscal year 24 and 25, it's just following that trend. The other thing that happened over the last few years is that we have budgeted less. I'm sorry, we have bonded less because we bond based on spending, and so the capital spending has been delayed a little bit, even though the bonds have been authorized to the capital budget. We haven't had the need to bond as much, again, because there have been some delays in the capital spending due to a variety of reasons. There were projects that they came at a higher cost, the cost of inflation, the supply chain concerns. So that's what changed our debt service projections a little bit. But again, fiscal year 24-25 just follows the trend. We're also estimating that we're going to issue about $60 million in bonds in each fiscal year. So that, in addition to the existing debt service, the assumption that we're going to issue those new bonds is also embedded in there. The one change that you're going to see from the governor's budget versus the House is we made a request. The Department of Revenue Administration, Administrative Services, and Treasury requested to move the debt service that relates to the Department of Revenue Administration for their RIMS project. By law, the way that bonding authorization was established was that beginning with fiscal year 22, that bonding was going to become self-funded. So we moved that portion of the debt service, which relates to general fund. We're moving that debt service to the Department of Revenue Administration. So they're going to have their own debt service and pay it with their own budget. So the next significant change in this budget is on page 6 of my handout, and that relates to the unclaimed property that we pay. This is unclaimed property that has been already that we escheat to the general fund. Per law, we are required to pay that property in perpetuity. So for the first time, we actually budgeted those claims. Since 1985, the office has not included this amount in the budget. What we are required to do is we need to go to Governing Council every 2 weeks to request that a warrant is authorized to be able to pay these claims. The problem with that is this is a month, for example, where the Executive Council only meets once. And so we are implementing, or over the years, we have implemented technology to increase the efficiency of our payments, our claims, our review. So that's going really well. But then we get to the point where we need to wait for the Governing Council meeting. So this actually will allow us to have an amount in the budget. We don't have to go to the Governing Council to request the authorization to pay, but it does require a minor change in the law. So this language, which is included in this on page 6, is also included in House Bill 2. So the governor agreed to that, the House agreed to that. So respectfully request that you consider the same. So that again is a significant change that's going to create significant efficiencies, and of course individuals and businesses are going to get paid a lot sooner. I guess the next change is on page 7 is, and it's just so you can, page 7 describing the payment, the meals and rooms tax distribution, and that's on page 196 of your book. The only thing I'm going to highlight here is this law on the formula changed during the previous biennium. We paid in fiscal year 22 was the first year we paid based on that formula. When you read the law, it's just the way the formula reads or the law reads. The amount that was budgeted for fiscal year 23 was lower than the actual calculation. It's just again, it's just a matter of it's just as a result of the formula, the number is larger. So the actual number that we paid in fiscal year 23 was actually 121 million, which is close to what we're budgeting for fiscal year 24 and 25. Again, it's just a result of the formula that was amended during the last biennium. Other than that, the other on page 8 of the handout, it just talks about the College Savings Commission, and it includes the two programs, the Unique Scholarship Programs, the Governor Scholarship Program. The only difference you're going to see on the Governor Scholarship Program, and that is on page 206, is that the amount that we receive during the previous biennium, nothing was budgeted for fiscal year 22 and 23, but we received an appropriation of $6 million for fiscal year 21. So we just used those funds that can be brought forward to pay the cost of that program. And then for this current biennium, or for the new budget, we included $3 million in each fiscal year, and the governor approved that. The House also approved that. The other amounts are just, no significant changes in the other accounting units. We just include the payments. We also include the budget for the LCHIP program, the Community Development Block Grant. Those are just pass-through grants that just are housed in the Treasurer's budget. So I'll stop there to see if there are any questions. I was trying to go fast.
Questions, Senator Birdsell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for taking my question. Just out of curiosity, you had mentioned that you're transferring your IT over to DOIT. Do you feel that that's secure rather than a standalone in your arena versus the transferring it to the DOIT?
It is. I believe, we will, if there's a need to, if we are able to double our security, we will. So the idea is to really be part of the bigger agency. DOIT receives support. They received additional federal funding for all of the various initiatives to increase security. So I know they are, we just need to be part of the bigger group. We can't just be standalone. I think it would be a greater risk if we stayed by ourselves rather than being part of the larger group. I know Department of Information Technology is doing a great job with that. We will maintain one position. The current IT manager will stay with us. This employee will also support our applications that we have with the abandoned property program and our relationship with the banks. We use online banking. So all of those, the support of those programs, DOIT won't oversee that part. So we will continue with overseeing that piece. But when there is an opportunity for us to increase security and again, be protected for cybersecurity issues, we will do that. We will do anything to do that. Thank you for the question.
Senator Rosenwald?
I have two questions, actually.
Please.
First, about the rainy day fund. So last year we took out $100 million. The surplus statement that we saw yesterday has, at the end of the next biennium, $40 million going back in, or kind of less than half of our statutory ceiling. Can you talk about whether that's enough for how the bond rating agencies are feeling, or whether we should try to put more in?
Thank you for the question, Senator. So very timely. So what I took the liberty to make some copies of this, but what I would like to share with you is, so I'll try to be brief answering that question. So I'll start with last year when the money was transferred from the rainy day fund to be set aside for this other fund for the YDC settlement. We had to communicate that to rating agencies, and only one rating agency came back, wanted to meet with us. And so the question at the time was Fitch Ratings. they were asking, well, what are the plans? So they understood the situation, explained the state had the need to take this money, use it for this other important purpose. They understood that. The question that was asked then is, what is the state going to do to replenish, that funding, right? And so we just issued our bonds 2 weeks ago. We had our bond sale, and as part of that process, we have to prepare this official statement, as you're all familiar with, and the LBA is gonna help us distribute the books to all of you. So as part of our process to be able to sell our bonds, we need to be reviewed by the rating agencies. And so we had meetings with the rating agencies the week before our sale. And we had the opportunity to, this is when we have the opportunity to really sell the state. We have to be able to, highlight how good the economy is doing, how well our revenues are doing, the various initiatives that support our economy. And we also had the ability to, because that's information that was available at the time, we had the opportunity to include the proposal that the governor had. And so that was, again, the governor's proposal. And with that proposal, there were plans to add more money to our reserves. The rating agencies liked what they heard. We included that information in the official statement, the preliminary official statement, and so that's what we published to our investors. We had a very successful sale 2 weeks ago, but just yesterday, what I just distributed is, just yesterday we had to include, it was a recommendation from Bond Counsel and our financial advisor to include a supplement to the official statement, the printed book, just because of the significant change. And this is essentially what this is saying is describing the current surplus statement. So essentially it's a change between what the governor had proposed and what the House passed. We are required to report to investors, significant changes. And the important part of this is really the impact to the rainy day fund. So to try to answer your question, it is important how much we maintain in our reserves. The state is doing a wonderful job in the economy. The rating agency said, as part of that, I guess I'll back up for a moment. As part of that conversation that we had with rating agencies, our ratings were affirmed. What that means is that we kept the same ratings, and particularly one, and I'm going to mention, is S&P Global. They also kept the positive outlook. What that means, if we've had that for a couple of years, that means that we are being evaluated to receive an upgrade. The clear message that was given to me is, if the state, or to all of us, if the state continues the way is doing, with the economy, the demographic trends, how all the various initiatives that the state is embarking, and to make sure that the working age population is increasing and all of that, and the state also continues with its commitment to maintain strong reserves, we will get an upgrade next year. So, very long answer to your question, but it is important to maintain the reserves.
Did you have a follow-up, Senator?
So the quick answer is very important to maintain our reserves. So I guess I can't say a number specific. That's obviously part of the difficult task that you all have, with the revenues information that you're obtaining and all of the proposals that you're hearing. At the end, how much the rainy day fund will have is a difficult task, and I completely understand. But what I would just want to emphasize is how important it is to the rating agencies, to investors, that the state maintains a strong balance sheet. The reserves is an important piece, just like all of us are required to, we should all have an emergency fund, right? We should have between 3 to 6 months to, in case there's an economic downturn. So that's really the answer, that's really an important, it is an important piece of.
All right, quick follow-up.
Well, it's on a different, we're sitting on something like $3 billion. $3 $3 billion of cash. How much money are we making in interest every year? Where is it going? Where does it show up in the budget?
Great question. Thank you for the question. As you all know, we just started earning interest, so this is a new with the interest rate increasing. We're seeing numbers that we hadn't seen in a long time. So all of that right now is being recorded under interest on surplus funds, so it's an unrestricted portion. At the end of the year, we need to take that amount that we're earning and we need to allocate it to all of the various dedicated funds or funds that are entitled to receive interest. So we need to do that allocation. But the estimates that we have right now will be submitted and what we provided to Ways and Means is for fiscal year 23, we estimate we're going to have about $35 million. For fiscal year 23, about the same in fiscal year 24 and a little bit less in 25. Those are conservative numbers because it depends on, it is likely that we're going to keep interest rates higher, but what's unclear is for how long we're going to have the strong cash position that we have. So the general fund right now has about $2 billion, but it's all, half of that is ARPA money. So it will all depend of how those funds are being spent over the next 2 years. We do need to spend that money at some point. So that allows us to have a very strong cash position, but we are certainly earning interest right now.
Any others? All right, seeing none, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
All right, next up is LCHIP. We're running a little bit late. Oh, all right, very good. Well, there's no pressure. Just,
Well, it's also, I say, a little bit of a palate cleanser.
there we go. That's well
So
put.
while the handout is going around, I'll get started.
All right.
Thank you for having me. My name is Paula Belmore. I'm the Executive Director of LCHIP, following my predecessor, the great Digit Taylor, with big shoes to fill. As you all know, LCHIP is an independent state authority created in 2000. We were charged with ensuring that the most important natural, cultural, and historical resources of the state be preserved in perpetuity, and we have been doing that for some 23 years. LCHIP was designed and continues to operate in the New Hampshire way. We are a community-based voluntary initiative supporting public-private partnerships. The projects that we fund are locally conceived and locally driven. And you'll see some of the impact of that when we talk about the changes in our expenditures from year to year a little bit later. LCHIP grants to date have benefited 198 New Hampshire communities. That's 85% of our cities and towns. If you add in the unincorporated places, it's a little bit lower, but that's quite impressive. On page 2 of the handout, you'll find a brief overview of LCHIP's program impact to date. And I invite you to call me, email me, reach out if you have any questions or would like to learn more, or perhaps go on a quick tour of New Hampshire. But for today, we'll focus on page 1. Since 2009, LCHIP grant funds accrue from a $25 surcharge assessed on documents that are recorded at the county registries of deeds. That ties our grant funding directly to the pace of the real estate market in the state. When the market's hot, we have more money to grant. When it slows, so does our funding. Of each $25 collected, $1 stays at the county level as an administrative fee, and the rest is deposited into one of the dedicated funds the state treasurer was referring to, held at Treasury. So those funds come in, and then the board awards funds. We award now based on cash in hand. So in November of this year, we will look to see how much has accrued between November of last year and October of 23, and that's the amount we will make available. So we never fund more than we have in hand. So once those grant awards are made, it can take anywhere from 1 year to 5 years for a project to be completed. And the disbursements go out as those projects progress. So as you can imagine, you all know of the impacts from the pandemic, and that affected project completion rates significantly. We had issues with supply chain, we had issues with labor, we had issues simply with volunteers not being able to meet face-to-face and advance their project. That is what you'll see when you look at page 1. The decrease in expenditures in fiscal year '22 is a result of that. Most of our projects pretty much came to a halt for some number of months, and then it took them time to get going. But they are going now, and in fiscal year '23, we're seeing that pace pick back up. I would expect we'll be back to normal by fiscal year '24. Maybe it'll still a little slow down. They definitely, price increases have impacted these projects. They have to go back, run a few more bake sales, do whatever they have to do to get that money so they can move forward. But they're working hard, and they're closing projects, which is wonderful. So because of that, our budget line is $5 million. That's what we expect to be able to expend again in fiscal year '24, and we ask that you maintain that budget line as the governor and House did. How's that? Was that like
It's very good.
good?
Questions? Yes, Senator.
Just thank you for taking my, just very quickly.
Sure.
When you have, for instance, in fiscal year '22, you had 2.9, just over 2.9. Does that, what do you have left over? Does that roll over into, I'm sorry.
So our funds are non-lapsing.
Okay.
Yes, that's our actual expenditures, what we paid out to projects, but yes, they're non-lapsing.
Thank you.
Any others? Seeing none, we thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
The CDFA is up next. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Katie Easterly Marte. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Development Finance Authority. Thank you for the opportunity to address you regarding our one line in the State Treasury Department's budget for fiscal year '24 and '25, which is the New Hampshire's required match for administration of the Federal Community Development Block Grant Program, better known as CDBG. The Community Development Finance Authority is state-chartered independent nonprofit organization similar to LCHEP. We're a state authority. We work in partnership with the state and federal initiatives to strengthen New Hampshire's communities. We do that through the distribution of resources to municipalities, nonprofits, and businesses. I am here to request continued match funding from the state of New Hampshire. The request of $260,000 in fiscal year 2024 and $280,000 in 2025 represents the federally required match of state funds towards program administration of the Community Development Block Grant. This increase from prior budget years meets the minimum state match requirement and will enable CDFA to best meet the needs of New Hampshire communities. CDFA will continue to increase the technical assistance and training provided to leverage these federal resources, meet the compliance requirements, and deliver great projects on the ground in our communities. For nearly 20 years, CDFA has provided the state with an exceptionally cost-effective system for administering these CDBG resources. The CDBG program is focused on the development of viable, sustainable, vibrant communities by providing decent housing, suitable living environments, and expanding economic opportunities. And there's a focus on primarily low and moderate income persons that the CDBG program serves. CDFA has awarded more than $180 million in CDBG funds since 2003. These critical resources have been deployed across the state and have made significant impacts on economic development, housing, and community initiatives across our municipalities. Between January 1st, 2020 and June 30th, 2022, New Hampshire's Community Development Block Grant Program assisted more than 15,000 people through public services. We made public facility improvements and emergency grants, created or retained jobs, and rehabilitated or preserved 605 housing units for low and moderate income households. We also provided technical assistance through our partners to nearly 900 micro enterprises. So those are small businesses with 5 and less employees. The requested support will ensure that New Hampshire has continued access to millions of federal dollars that are meeting critical needs to the economic success of our state. These efforts include the Department of Business and Economic Affairs Economic Recovery and Expansion Strategy and the Council on Housing Stability's 3-year strategic plan. New Hampshire's CDBG program prioritizes investments in areas that support these strategies, including the development of affordable housing, expansion of affordable quality childcare facilities, creating critical infrastructure in our communities, and increasing access to quality economic opportunities. In addition, CDBG projects in New Hampshire have leveraged tens of millions of dollars in matching capital. This program is from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, known as HUD, and it uses a formula to allocate resources to the state of New Hampshire. And we anticipate that the allocation to New Hampshire over the next 2 years will be approximately $21 million. As all eligible New Hampshire municipalities and counties have the opportunity to access $1.5 million each year. And those resources, again, can support affordable housing, public facility improvements, and economic development. CDFA administers competitive grant rounds throughout the year. Our staff conducts extensive programmatic and financial reviews of each application, and an independent 11-member Community Development Advisory Committee, and further confirmed by the CDFA 11-member Board of Directors. So in all, we have 22 New Hampshire citizens who review and approve projects that are locally generated and developed. And once CDFA board recommends funding, the proposed awards are sent to the Executive Council for final approval. Federal funds come with significant requirements. To ensure these projects are successful, CDFA's professional staff provide training and technical assistance to our grantees throughout the process. We work closely with partners to find creative solutions and offer guidance on project development, as well as ease the burden of compliance with those federal requirements. It's worth noting through the CARES Act, the state of New Hampshire was allocated approximately $14.3 million of additional resources to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, and these funds are being used specifically in response to COVID-19. With these additional resources, CDFA developed a new public services program, and it addressed the needs of the most vulnerable populations in New Hampshire communities. We worked quickly to implement the program and provide communities and nonprofits access to federal resources. Those are turning into infrastructure projects that are now being funded by the typical community development block grant program. One example of that is actually the way station in Conway. So they came in originally to provide public services to vulnerable members of the community. And through that public service grant, they actually recognized that there was a need for long-term services in their community. They then were actually able to apply to the block grant program for a planning grant, which identified how they could acquire a building and continue to provide those services after the pandemic. And they've most recently received an implementation grant. So we're really leveraging those pandemic-related resources to long-term solutions for New Hampshire's communities. Throughout the administration of these additional federal resources, we had the opportunity to provide grants to municipalities and counties alongside their nonprofit partners. We found that technical assistance for communities and nonprofits of all sizes was really important to their long-term success. We respectfully request that the state of New Hampshire continue to provide federally required match funds in the total of $540,000 for 2024 and 2025 state fiscal years. Your support ensures continued deployment of nearly $21 million of resources into New Hampshire's communities for community economic development projects. Thank you for consideration of our request, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Are there questions? Seeing none, we thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Keep up the good work. We have the secretary with us from the Department of State. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Nice to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm David Scanlon, Secretary of State, and with me is Deputy Secretary of State Aaron Hennessy. The budget that is proposed before you for the Secretary of State's office is the governor's efficiency budget. The only changes or additions to the budget are 4 additional staff members spread out through the different divisions within our department. And then an additional $2,000 a year was placed in the budget for the Canadian Trade Council. The House added that in after they had their hearing. The department has been working really hard in a number of areas to make major improvements, and the improvements are becoming fairly obvious at the present time. We have upgraded our information technology systems, and I'm really happy to report, for example, corporations just finished their April 1st annual return deadline, and the computer system, the online filing system, really worked flawlessly this time for the first time that I can remember. It's just been plagued with issues in the past, And it was a very positive experience, not only for us, but also the customers that use the system. We are doing a replacement system of our centralized voter database. We expect that that is going to be nearing completion sometime late summer or the fall. It's going to have some significant improvements, and we think that there's going to be efficiencies related to that with the local election officials that intimately use that system. We have hired a new state archivist because Brian Burford retired at the end of last year. Ashley Miller is her name, and she's doing a fantastic job really going through the collections, categorizing them, getting ready to scan them, and we've improved the digitization facility up at the archives to the point that we're going to start putting a lot of these collections online and just let the general public have a lot more access to them. Yeah, I mean, things in the department are just going well, and the one thing that Aaron is going to address is the legislative specials that are going through the system now that are adding additional election-related requirements, and those items are going to have a cost attached to them, which are not reflected in the budget. So, Aaron, you want to address those?
Sure. So I just saw your chairman over in House Election Law, and this was at his request. Right now, the only bills left that have not been retained or ITL'd by the House or the Senate that have a fiscal note attached to them are the three before you, three Senate ones. And you have this information, right? Okay. And these bills have a fiscal note but did not have an appropriation associated with them. So the first is Senate Bill 70. And this is the establishment of the election information portal that both the Senate and I believe the House support. It's being heard later today in the House Election Law Committee, so we'll see what comes of that. But initially, in the fiscal note on SB 70, the bill had 2 additional employees positions and upfront cost of building the portal. After extensive conversations with Senator Gray for that, I've included the IT position that we initially had in the upfront cost for a year, but still have the maintenance of the portal and an additional person to help answer a lot of the questions from the election officials and the users going forward. What the portal will do for our department is put a lot of the questions that would normally go to your city or town clerk or to the supervisors of the checklist on our department, because users will be using the portal at home and calling the department number on the portal versus having questions of their local election officials. So it'll also require a lot of training, both for our staff and for voters and for election officials. It'll be, I think, much more efficient for election officials too, and in the end for voters, much easier. So we are in support of that bill, but there is a cost to that. So that's what you see before you. And those are general funds. Do you have any questions on that? Sorry. The next one, SB 105, is related to vital records. This bill passed both the policy and the fiscal committee in the Senate and is going to be heard later this month in the House. And this would require the vital records to change their mother's worksheet, which is filled out with a live birth usually at the hospital or at a birthing center. The initial upfront cost for this of approximately $100,000 is to do the IT portion of the birth worksheet in our Nevern system. The reduction in revenue is based on a short conversation via email that we've had with the CDC that says if we do not give them the data that we may not potentially collect when we make this change, we will lose the revenue from contract we have with them to provide them with the data. There is another potential loss in revenue we would receive from any future funds that the Department of Health and Human Services gets for vital record improvements, and those are electronic improvements. Those funds go directly to DHHS and they send them over to the Vital Record Improvement Fund. But those are, it's not a standard stream of revenue that the state sees, so I can't predict how much that we will see in loss in the future. I think, though, in the last biennium, we received approximately $600,000 from the federal government for that. So that, so this is a general fund cost in '24 to meet the deadline of the project, and a loss of federal funds that would fund the Vital Records Department that would need to be replaced with general funds. And then the final one is SB 157, and that's related to the election audits. The House just heard this one. I'm not sure if they're going to make changes to it or not, but this is basically the continuation of the sunsetted audits that were done at the end of the 2022 primary and general elections. The $37,000 is an ongoing maintenance cost for the software. It's a software subscription. And then every other year when we actually do the audits, there's a small fee for each of the ballots to program the machine to read those audits. So this would be an ongoing cost in the future, and not just for this biennium, but since you're only looking at this is what the cost is for this biennium, all general funds.
And we're happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. Are there questions? I feel ignorant asking this. Right to know ombudsman? 12 million? I don't know
12 million?
what it's showing. They're coming in? Okay.
Yeah, the legislature passed a law in the last session creating the Office of Right to Know Ombudsman,
Okay.
administratively attached to our office. So we are providing office space and office supplies and
They're
equipment.
their own entity.
But the ombudsman is responsible for his own budget.
All right, I'll ask then. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you both.
Thank you.
It was listed as State Department. That's a lot of money. Boxing and Wrestling Commission is next. They have 5 minutes, according to the schedule. Okay. You're back in charge.
Good afternoon.
There you go.
I'm Assistant Secretary of State and Secretary of State's office. I'm here on behalf of Commissioner and Chair Bobby Stevens, who is the Chair of Boxing and Wrestling Commission, who's not able to be with you folks today. Boxing and Wrestling is administratively attached to our department. As you can see, their budget is fairly minimal. They oversee all boxing and mixed martial arts events for the state. They regulate those individuals and regulate the events. And their budget is mainly consisted of per diems for those commissioners and their travel expenses. There is in-house bill 2. Boxing and wrestling is looking to be moved to the office of OPLC. And if that happens, then this will go away. I'm not sure how that affects the funding, if these funds will go with them, if they're going to be absorbed, but if that does not happen, we are happy to continue to provide the services that we need.
Cool.
And I'm happy to answer any questions.
You're in charge.
Questions from, questions from the committee?
Great job.
Thank you.
Another excellent job.
Is it? All right. Oh, no wonder it's so good.
DRA.
DRA is here. Yep. You see, we kept it right on time.
I see that,
It's dumb luck, but I'll take credit.
okay. Did the commission on
Yes.
developmental, they come?
They
came?
did, yeah. They ended up flipping with the executive council.
All right.
A little breeze out there. I know, it's blowing that way. It's a warm room. Wait a
Welcome, Commissioner. Your
Last
show.
but not least.
Your show.
Save the best for last.
Thank you.
Yes, there you go. That's true.
That
Nothing
is
else
true. I
works.
appreciate that.
Without her department, we wouldn't have money to spend.
Right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Lindsay Stepp, Commissioner, New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administration. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present our 24-25 operating budget. With me today are Assistant Commissioner Ora Lemire and Business Administrator Shelley Grilano. The mission of the DRA is to fairly and efficiently administer the tax laws of the state of New Hampshire, collecting the proper amount of taxes due while incurring the least cost to taxpayers, in a manner that merits the highest degree of public confidence in our integrity. Further, we provide prompt and constructive assistance to the municipal units of government in the matters of budget, finance, and the appraisal of real estate. Together, we have developed a thoughtful budget that will provide the resources for our team to administer the tax laws of our state for another 2 fiscal years in a manner that's consistent with this mission. In fiscal year 2022, the DRA collected $2.7 billion in state revenue, with total expenses of less than $18.7 million, some of which is for activities not related to revenue collection, such as local assessment reviews and state aid. When you remove those unrelated costs, our cost of collection is just over 0.5%. The information included with this testimony explains how we were able to build a biennial budget that continues to be an unparalleled return on state tax dollar investment. We look forward to working with you as you craft the budget. Moving to the presentation. Page 2 includes our mission statement, which I just read, so I don't need to read it again. Page 3 includes a high-level overview of DRA's org chart. On the far left, we have the administration unit. Within that unit is the Commissioner's Office, our legal and tax policy, HR, business office, and project management. We have the audit division. They perform our audit functions. They are broken down into our in-state bureau, our multi-entity bureau, our multi-state bureau, our discovery bureau, and our tobacco auditors. We have a collections division that collects outstanding taxes due. We have a taxpayer services division. The idea with the taxpayer services division, if you are not under audit and we are not trying to collect outstanding taxes due, you're going to be with our taxpayer services division. That's our call center. We have a 5-person call center that answers the phone, usually on the first or second ring. Wait times are significantly less than the IRS. So if you ever have any issues, feel free to call into our call center. Taxpayer services also process our documents this time of year as we're getting a fair number of tax returns in the mail. That's the primary function of that division. And they also perform routine taxpayer account maintenance. Last, all the way on the right, we have the municipal and property division. Those are the folks that set the municipal tax rates in all of the municipalities. They perform our property appraisal oversight. They value utilities for the utility property tax, and they assist municipalities with the administration of the gravel tax and the timber tax, also known as sticks and stones. We have to be funny sometimes. Yeah. On page 4, this is a high-level, big picture overview of our budget. You will see in the chart at the top, we have fiscal year 2022 actual expense, fiscal year 2023 adjusted authorized, and then the House budget for 24 and 25. We have 3 funding sources. We have the general fund, which is approximately 90% of our budget. Most of our money comes from the general fund. We have some money from the Education Trust Fund that we use to administer the low and moderate property tax relief. So those property property owners who have income below certain thresholds receive some relief from their property tax in the form of this program, and we administer that program and cut the checks, which come out of the Education Trust Fund. And then lastly, we have some agency income related to flood control, and that's for the Merrimack River and the Connecticut River. Those are monies received from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the state of Connecticut that we use to reimburse towns along the Merrimack River and along the Connecticut River for lands that were taken as part of flood control. So when dams were put in place to prevent the rivers from continually rising and flooding, there was land that was lost as part of that. And so we reimbursed the municipalities for those land taxes that were lost. Our general fund operating budget is 75% salary and benefits. We are a department of people, not things or programs. Much of the difference that you'll see between the 18.67 million of total funds of actual expense in 22 and the 22.1 million of adjusted authorized expenses for 23. Much of that difference is due to our current vacancy rate. We are hovering around 14 to 15% at the moment. It has been as high as 18%, but we've accomplished some good hiring in the past couple months, and so we're hoping to continue on that trend. The vacancy or the variances that you'll see from 23 to 24 and 25, I'll discuss those on the next few slides, and I'll also cover the change in the position count that you see when we go from 23 to 24 and 25. On page 5, just some agency budget highlights. Our budget request and the amount that has been funded through the House is sufficient. We have sufficient funding for employee training, out-of-state travel for audits, overtime for our peak periods, such as the month of April, in our taxpayer services division and collections division, continuing maintenance on our fleet of state-owned cars that we use when we perform in-state audits and that our property appraisers use when they go out to assist municipalities with appraisal and assessment work, and postage for our communications to taxpayers. Training, travel, and the work that's been performed on our cars has really increased since we've come out of COVID. Travel obviously significantly decreased during the pandemic, along with training opportunities. So the budget sufficiently now funds us to kind of get back to our pre-COVID levels of training and audits. There are no budget increases for one-time state workforce efficiency enhancement program or SWEEP projects. We received federal funding for 3 projects. That is one-time funds. We are using one-time funds for one-time costs, so there's no increases in our budget for those projects. And our division directors, business office, and managers worked hard on this budget to budget conservatively and accurately, requesting only the funds that we need and not including extraneous wants. On page 6, current position count. So in fiscal year 23, we have 156 full-time classified and unclassified positions. In the House budget, that decreases to 153 positions. So the House is abolishing 3 positions that we currently have. Those positions are currently unfunded. They are a clerk 3, a tax examiner 1, and a tax examiner 2 within our taxpayer services division. With some of the efficiencies that we've seen through our new revenue information management system, these are positions that we don't feel we need any longer, and so we are comfortable with those positions being abolished. They are currently unfunded. I did not have any plans to fund them, and so abolishing them is fine by us. There are 3 positions in fiscal 23 that are unfunded that the House did fund for 24 and 25. Those are 2 multi-state audit positions and 1 municipal accounts auditor position. The municipal accounts auditor, that is, we requested funding for that position in order to ensure succession planning. We have folks that are approaching retirement age within that division. I'd like to get this position funded, get someone hired into it so we can do some cross-training and knowledge transfer so that we don't have years of service walk out the door. Particularly within our equalization unit, we have folks that have been at the department for over 40 years. They are due to retire. They have earned that retirement, but I want to make sure that I can get the information from them before they go and that they can train their successor. So that's the request for the municipal accounts auditor. The two multi-state audit positions that are unfunded currently that would be funded in the next biennium, those are revenue generating positions. These are our auditors that audit large Fortune 500 companies. We anticipate that over the course of the biennium, they will each generate $1.5 million of revenue. So the House did include funding for those positions, and that revenue will be included in the surplus statement if the funding remains. Moving on to page 7, just going through increases in our general fund budget from 23 to 24 and 25. The first significant increase is our RIMS, Revenue Information Management Support. RIMS was a $30,160,000 capital appropriation to modernize our tax administration software. It was a very successful project. It began in late 2018 and was fully implemented in 2021 through 3 phases. During COVID, on time, on budget. It has modernized the department. It has increased our efficiencies. It has provided taxpayers and tax practitioners with an online portal called Granite Tax Connect that they can utilize to access their accounts and interact with the department. It really has been a life-changing project for all of us. The capital appropriation included hardware and software licensing through fiscal 2025, but only included software maintenance and consulting through the first quarter of 2024. The reason for that is in 2017, 2018, when we were procuring this project with Fast Enterprises, utilizing their Gentax software, I did not want to sign us up for a predetermined amount of support for post-implementation because I didn't know what that was going to look like. I didn't know what we were going to need, and I worried we would either oversubscribe and be wasteful with the money that we've received, or we would potentially undersubscribe and not have the support that we needed. So now that we are about a year, almost a year and a half, post final implementation of RIMS, I know what level of support that we need. And so that's what we have requested, and the governor and the House have included in their budgets. So that's $2.3 million in 24 and almost $2.7 million in 25. This is funding that would be through a time and materials contract. So it would be up to this amount. The time and materials contract will again give me and the department the flexibility to determine the level of support that we need. I anticipate going forward that the amount of support needed will decrease. But we're just, like I said, about a year and a half out from go live. This feels like the right amount of support at this point. It does not feel like excess. It does not feel insufficient. But the time and materials will give us some flexibility that we can potentially start to scale that back as we move into the next budget. The other thing that will potentially allow us to scale back the support needed for RIMS is that the budget from the House includes funding for 2 DOIT positions that are embedded at DRA that are currently unfunded. For the DOIT embedded staff at DRA, 40 to 60% of them are facing retirement in the next biennium. So again, we have this succession planning problem that I'm trying to get ahead of. So by funding these 2 positions, we'll be able to hire 2 new employees, be successful with knowledge transfer for maintaining our system going forward, and then that will also give us the base that we need as we start to decrease the amount that we're needing to rely on our RIMS consultants and vendor going forward. Those 2 changes are the most significant to our general fund that the department requested. Moving on to page 8, there is another change to the general fund budget for DRA. This was at the request of the Treasury Department. This is moving the debt service for RIMS from Treasury's budget into DRA's budget. So for the $30,160,000 capital appropriation, the first $6 million of debt was to be funded by the general fund. The remaining $24,160,000 is to be funded by revenue uplift that we generate by using our RIMS system. We, under the statute, can transfer up to $4 million a year of revenue uplift into a dedicated fund to pay this debt service. So we already have the dedicated fund. We're now moving the debt service into the budget. So that's an increase of $1.6 million in '24 and $1.6 million in '25. It's really, at the bottom line, a net zero because it's just moving from Treasury into DRA, but obviously it shows as an increase into our budget. We've been very successful with generating revenue uplift from RIMS. We have reached the $4 million cap in fiscal year '22. We did that primarily in two ways. The first was reminder to pay letters. So under our old system, if you sent in your tax return and you owed $100 and you forgot to include the check, we would send you a tax notice for $100 that you owed us from your return. We would never contact you again until you were in our collections division and we were looking to pursue additional collection activity. Now, 30 days after we send that initial tax notice, we send you a reminder. We know people are busy. We know mail gets lost in the pile that sits, in everybody's kitchen or on your breakfast table. Now we send you a reminder after 30 days. Just that reminder has generated $2.3 million. It's less work for us. We're not having to pursue collection activity. It's automated through the system. We don't even touch it. It just happens automatically. The other way we have generated revenue uplift is through the use of federal tax information. So we receive information from the IRS that allows us to compare and contrast a state return to a federal return. There's a lot of security, obviously, from the IRS that's required in order to utilize this information. Our old administration software system did not have the security requirements that were sufficient to satisfy all of the needs of the IRS. So our ability to use this information was limited. With our new RIMS system, we are fully compliant with everything that the IRS asks for, so we have greater use of this information and allows us to make sure that everybody is in compliance. So we don't see significant disparities between what you're telling the IRS and what you're telling the state. On page 9, I just wanted to cover the differences that you'll see in the Education Trust Fund. Again, this is used to pay the low and moderate income hardship grants. You will see that we spent about in fiscal year 2022, we spent just under $800,000. Our 23 appropriation is $800,000, but in 24 and 25, the amounts go to $1.5 million. That is the result of Chapter 95 laws of 2021, which increased the income limitations and the maximum amount of tax relief available for the L&M program. The change was effective for the April 1st property tax year, where we issued 5,918 claims, totaling $1.4 million, and that was an increase from the 5,572 claims, totaling $800,000 for the prior year. The difference between the $800,000 that's appropriated for 23 and the $1.4 million that we spent, that will be covered with a warrant that the governor is authorized to draw. So we don't have a funding issue in 23, but then in 24 and 25, we right-sized that amount to the $1.5 million. On page 10, covering the agency income line for flood control, you will see in fiscal year 22, the actual expense was just over $10,000. But in 23, our adjusted authorized is $630,000, and it decreases slightly in 24 and 25 to $581,000. The reason for the difference between the $10,000 and the $630,000 is that we did not receive full payment from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the state of Connecticut. The 24-25 budget assumes that Massachusetts will reimburse their share of 70% of the Merrimack River Valley Compact, as well as 50% of the Connecticut River Valley Compact, and that Connecticut will reimburse their share of the 40% for the Connecticut River Valley Compact. I see chuckling. There is a long history of Massachusetts not fully paying its obligation timely or sufficiently for the Merrimack River Valley Compact. I'm happy to report, though, that outstanding amounts for fiscal year 15 through fiscal year 22 were recently settled with the help of the Department of Justice, and we did receive payment for just under $3.5 million for those years. However, the settlement did not include payment for fiscal 23. We are still waiting for Massachusetts to potentially make payment for fiscal 23. If they do not, we will utilize the process which we have every other year, where the governor will draw a warrant to from unappropriated funds to fill in that gap. So the towns will still get the money that they are due. They always receive the full amount. It just then becomes us kind of footing Massachusetts' portion of the bill. But that is the difference between the 22 and the 23 numbers. Lastly, I just wanted to highlight 3 sections within HB2 since I was here. Sections 84 to 87, which you can find on pages 30 to 31, is the IND repeal. So the IND would now be repealed per HB2 after the 3% rate. It would not proceed to the 2% and the 1%. So the phased repeal of IND would go 5, 4, 3, and then gone, as opposed to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, gone. All DRA staff work on all taxes, so I don't anticipate that the accelerated repeal would really have any impact to us in any sort of staff suddenly not having work to do. They work, like I said, across all tax types. Also, we will have a fair amount of work to do in terms of audit and collection activity even after the tax is repealed, making sure that folks are in compliance and that we can fully wrap up the tax. So I don't anticipate at this point any impacts to our operating budget, but I did just want to raise that as a change. Sections 185 and to 186 on pages 65 to 66 is the amount of BET and BPT revenue that's transferred from the general fund to the Education Trust Fund. HB2 out of the House would fix the amount going to the Education Trust Fund at 22.5% for each tax. Right now, the amount that's transferred to the Education Trust Fund is a formula based on the current tax rate. So moving to this fixed percentage is an administrative advantage for us. So right now, what we do is every payment that we receive, we look at what tax year it's for, we look at the corresponding tax rate because the tax rates have been changing in recent years, and then we have to apply the split specific to that payment. Moving to a fixed percent is administratively a lot easier for us. Lastly, section 340 on pages 106 to 107 addresses the RIMS debt service. And all this does is clarify that in the event, although I think it's highly unlikely, but in the event that that revenue uplift account that I was talking about did not have enough money in it to pay the debt service in any given year, that the governor is authorized to draw a warrant so that the debt service would still get paid. I think that's highly unlikely, but it's kind of just a belt and suspender move so that we wouldn't have insufficient funding for our debt service. So those are the 3 House Bill 2 sections that I just wanted to mention because they are at least somewhat related to our operating budget. That's all I had for today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator Birdsall saying first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Do you have any information? I know years ago we worked on the market-based sourcing.
Mm-hmm.
How is that going?
So market-based sourcing, the first year that we will see the impact to that would be returns that were filed on extension in the fall. So we're just kind of starting to analyze that information. Returns that we will now see in this next year, or now starting in March, April, will have market-based sourcing and single sales factor. So these returns that are starting to come in now, along with the returns on extension in the fall, is when we'll really see the impact of both the shift to market-based sourcing and the move to single sales factor. We have a number of our auditors participating in market-based sourcing and single sales factor apportionment training as we speak. That's one of the reasons why we like to see training money in our budget, so that we can keep them up to date on the various things that are going on. But it's something that we're watching, and we'll be prepared to provide additional information once we're able to more fully analyze those returns.
Follow up?
My last question, where would it be under the DRA or elsewhere if to find any pilot funds that are going out?
So those would be agreements that property owners enter into with the towns.
Right.
We have a list of pilots that we're generally aware of. I can reach out to you and get you a list of those. We keep track of them, but they're not anything that we necessarily enter into. They're just information that's provided to us.
Follow up?
Follow up?
The one I'm concerned about really is Hampstead, because it's the agreement between Hampstead Hospital and the town. So I want to make sure that it's in the budget, and I just want to make sure that I find it and see it.
Senator D'Alessandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick, Regina, we talked about that do you remember I asked the question about Hampstead, if the money that was in there included that? That's because I think we paid it the first time. Right. But, yeah.
And there was a supplement
that
had to go out.
Right. Good question. Thank you. I'm sure Hampstead is appreciative of that.
No doubt.
Just first question.
Yeah.
Is there ever a time when the hardship grants were totally spent?
That they were not totally spent.
Right. From your
There was a period of time. So you're gonna really test my memory. I would say 2010, 2011, 2012, that time period, DRA was spending the money because we were issuing the low and moderate relief checks, but we did not have the appropriation. The appropriation lived at the Department of Education.
Okay.
So they never spent the appropriation, and we spent money that wasn't appropriated to us, and some sort of magic happened at the end of the year. I believe in the 2014, 15, 16 timeframe, I worked with Commissioner John Beardmore at the time, and we moved that funding into DRA's budget. So we now have the appropriation and we spend the appropriation. When we moved it in from the Department of Education, it was the appropriation was more than we were spending. So over the past few budget cycles, we've worked to right size that appropriation. And you can see we spent about 1.4 million. The budget's going to have 1.5. The idea is to get it as close as possible. And if we're a little bit under, then we can draw a warrant. But we have worked to right size that. But yes, there was a period of time for some number of years where the spending, the appropriation, and the expense were in two different places.
Further question?
Of course.
With regard to the ribs and the maintenance and the T&M, T&M is a big item.
It is.
And you really, I have great confidence in your ability to judge whether buying maintenance is the big deal or doing it as you're saying. But I think you've taken you made two very important decisions. A, to pay your own debt service by money that you're making for us, and B, the limitation of the T&M. I was in the business for a little while, and T&M was what we lived on.
Yep.
To be honest with you. And how many revs have we got? Do we pick up revs every year, upgrades?
So
Are they part of the deal?
that's a great question. So with the time and materials, there's a couple of options. We can do time and materials, which is what we are doing currently and what we're proposing to do going forward. We can also buy set amounts of tiered service from FAST. And depending on the tier, you get various amounts of upgrades or not upgrades, etc. My concern with the various tiers of support is that we don't have a broad-based income tax and we don't have a broad-based sales tax.
Right.
And most states do. And the advantage of FAST and why we've been so successful is because all they do is tax administration software. It's a commercial off-the-shelf software that's customized for each state. But where we don't have the same tax portfolio as every other state, I don't know that I need to pay for every version upgrade because there might be things in that upgrade that are not applicable to any of the taxes that we administer.
Right.
So when we implemented, we went with the latest version. which was version 12. They are now moving to, I think because they were about to hit version 13, and 13 is an unlucky number. I don't know if this is why, but now they're changing and they're going to call it Core. And so we are going to move to Core 21. So calendar year 21 was when they started developing this Core software. We received money to upgrade to Core 21 from federal funds, from those sweep dollars. Our maintenance will remain the same. So that will get us current, and we're going to do Core 21 in fiscal 24 into fiscal 25. So I think we will be very well positioned. We will have the latest software, and then we can evaluate the core upgrades from there and come back and say, we don't need this upgrade, or it's time for us to upgrade. In terms of time and materials, that is how we're functioning currently. There was excess capital appropriation, and we moved into the time and materials contract for support. We currently have about 10 FASTs. We call fast employees FASTs. We currently have about 10 FASTs. It can fluctuate from time to time. What we're asking for 24 and 25 is 6 FASTs. So we see that we are able to take on some of the support and maintenance ourselves. I'm very comfortable with moving to 6, and I think in the future we could maybe go to 5 or 4. I don't know that we'll ever go to 0, but I think we're moving from 10 to 6. We're going in the right direction. We're just not ready to totally get to that bottom level number just yet.
Great. Well, I think it's a brilliant move. The transition was desperately needed, and you've done a great job of moving it, in a very comprehensive manner. I just one further thing about the software, because that's a key element.
It's a big dollar amount, yeah.
The software, it's cookie cutter basically,
Mm-hmm.
and you do the changes that you need.
Correct.
But nobody ever makes any changes in the software from your shop, but they're all made on the outside, so there's no problem with us disturbing the base.
Correct. So the core software we receive from the vendor, and then we make our customizations for New Hampshire. We try very hard not to customize anything that we don't have to, because that's just a vulnerability going forward, and it deviates us from core. When the vendor does these core upgrades, what they'll do is, if they found, hey, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, Massachusetts, Connecticut, all of which use the same software. So if you're a business that operates in New England, you have the ability to use the same software, which I think is nice. But hey, all of these states made this same customization. Let's put that into core. And so the idea is, going forward, you won't need as much customization, because the core product will pick up more and more of that over time. Yep. But yeah, we don't disturb core. We just kind of build onto it or customize it.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Pearl?
Thank you. Can we stop sending water to Massachusetts? No, that's not my real question.
I want to charge them a differential toll. If you're coming through Easy Pass with a mass plate, it's double.
I want to talk sticks, not stone.
Okay, sure.
Do you know the annual revenue from the timber tax?
That's a good question. I can most likely get that for you. That revenue is collected at the municipal level. Same with the gravel tax. But obviously, every municipality is not going to have a licensed forester or a logger on site to know, is that a maple tree? Is that an oak tree? What's the value of that stump? What was the value of the tree that they took down? So our role is to assist the municipalities with administering that tax. But I can get you how much is collected. And it varies, right? There's certain towns in certain areas of the state that have a lot more trees than others. We might even be able to break it down by town for you.
Follow up.
So does all of that revenue stay at the municipal level, or does any of it come back to the state?
It's all at the municipal level.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
time today. All right, if there's no further business, we shall be adjourned. All right. So I didn't ask it.